Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is the Miro Consulting webinar on Oracle OVM versus KVM. And we're going to give everybody a second to log in. People usually need a moment or so to get their headphones on, to get the screen up for the connection to get made. So we're going to start in about 30 seconds. Thanks. Again, if you're just joining us, we're just going to give everybody a chance to log in. Be like another 15, 20 seconds. Okay, thank you for joining us. This is Miro Consulting's webinar on Oracle's change from OVM to KVM. It is prepared for and will be presented by Wayne Federico, our COO and VP of Technical Services. Next slide. During this presentation, if you have any questions, please put them in the question tool in your webinar control panel. We won't read your name. Your question will be anonymous, and we will answer it to the best of our ability. So if you're here for some free consulting, now's the chance. Next slide. So real quick, just to tell you who we are and why we have any authority to speak on the subject. We are the leading global provider of software asset management and subscription management services for Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon Web Services, and Salesforce. We specialize in license management, audit advisory, negotiation tactics, support management, and cloud services. We basically help our clients maximize their ROI and negotiate successful contracts and settlements. But the most important thing I want you to remember about us is if you ever do work with us, we have a no-risk performance guarantee. And that means that we will find cost savings for you that will be greater than our fees. So it's never any risk. You're always going to come out on top. And nobody else has that exact performance guarantee. Next slide. All right, with that, I will hand it over to Wayne. Wayne, would you start us off?
Okay, thanks, Sean. So today, we're going to discuss the end of OVM, which is occurring in 2024, end of support, and explain the KVM that replaces it. So we're going to go over some end-of-life details, some differences, Linux, Red Hat versus Oracle Linux, support pricing for Oracle Linux, also OVM versus KVM CPU pinning comparison. There's some stuff there, as well as any kind of OVM pinning recommendations. Okay. Well, so the Oracle Virtual Machine has been around since August 2011. It was always meant to offer server virtualization options for Oracle software. It was never meant to replace the use of VMware by organizations, because Oracle never recommended it for use outside of their own Oracle software. It never had the totality of features, I'm talking about OVM, that VMware offers, but it did offer CPU pinning within single physical servers that Oracle would recognize, which is never the case with VMware and remains the case today. The recognition of CPU pinning functionality is important for limiting licensing costs. VMware has the features, but Oracle does not recognize its use to segment processing resources. So OVM always ended up being, a good solution for people who were really just kind of wanted it for their Oracle solutions. And this way they got the kind of the best of both worlds. It had the best performance under it. And also you could do pinning with it to kind of save on some costs. There are limitations to it, but we'll talk about that more later. Within the last year, Oracle has announced that they're ending support for OVM in June of 2024. And its functionality will be replaced by Oracle Linux KVM, which is an entirely different technology that offers additional features. Okay. Okay, we have a polling question. So if we can please choose that, gives us an idea of just what people are thinking.
And we will release this as we go here. So if you want the results, you've got to vote. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds if you haven't voted. Now is the time to get your vote in. And you will get to see, not named answers, but we're going to release the percentages. All right, we're ending it now.
Okay.
And there you go. You should see it popped up. Go ahead.
Good. That's great. Okay. All right. Now we've got going to the Oracle Linux KVM differences. The functionalities of Oracle Linux KVM are very similar to OVM, but Oracle has altered what must be licensed. That's some of the biggest things, and that's kind of the biggest things we talk about with clients. Even though KVM comes with most versions of Linux, including Red Hat, in order to get all features, you must be using Oracle Linux. So you can't really, like if you try to use just Red Hat, because what's confusing to people is Oracle Linux is really a derivative of Red Hat. But they add a whole bunch of additional functionality and technology into their version of it. And part of that is, even though KVM is in Red Hat Linux, if you only have Red Hat Linux, then you don't have access to everything without a subscription, because Red Hat requires a subscription. Oracle KVM access, it doesn't come with Oracle's Linux basic subscription. Organizations are required to purchase a support subscription to Oracle Linux Premier. There are no actual license fees, as the technology is still open source. Oracle Linux is actually free to use unless you need management functions, and that's kind of the difference. And if you need the management functions, which would include KVM, you need to have the Premier version of Premier support. Oracle KVM is managed via Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager, which is actually a totally different utility than what's utilized with OVM, but it happens to be able to also manage OVM instances, you know, if you had them running and you're doing the switch over. OVM would also require support subscription in addition to Oracle Linux. There used to be like an OVM license, and that's no longer the case, because the KVM is now included within the Oracle Linux subscription. Oracle Linux-based KVM provides a more friendly and centralized management interface for Oracle KVM instances. So it just seems to be easier to use. OVM was originally based on the open source Zen hypervisor, whereas Linux KVM is based on open source Overt project and uses the kernel-based virtual machine hypervisor. So just bringing that up just to kind of indicate they are two different technologies. Now, if anyone is running Solaris server instances under Oracle VM now, then Oracle recommends moving to Oracle VM Server for Spark, if you aren't already, because you might be. That was formerly known as Sun Logical Domains, which they don't help it kind of causing confusion, because if they're calling it OVM Server for Spark, you know, that's the thing that's going away in 2024 as far as support, but that's not really the exact product. This is a product specific to Sun Logical Domains, which always kind of existed within Sun. The other option you have with Spark servers is to utilize Solaris containers, if you can, for the same kind of functionality. Okay, that brings us on to our next polling question. We're curious here to kind of see just how many people are continuing to run on Solaris.
So exact question, if you have trouble seeing, is are you currently running OVM to supply Solaris server sessions? Again, if you answer my poll, I will share the results with you. I'll give it another 10 seconds. All right, if you haven't gotten it in, get it in now. And here we go.
Okay. Cool. All right. Moving on to the next thing. Oracle Linux versus Red Hat Linux. Since KVM is a part of Linux, the biggest differences exist at that level. Oracle Linux does not require a subscription to use unless you want to effectively use KVM. No, I'm kind of repeating myself here, but it's a very key point. Then you need the Linux Premier Support subscription. So it's kind of tricky because people think, hey, my Red Hat has KVM, but also Oracle doesn't recognize that. So Oracle Linux does not require a subscription to use unless you want to use the management functions, which again would require at least the Linux Premier Support subscription to utilize KVM. The basic would not include it. Red Hat Linux does require a support subscription for any of its use, so they would actually charge you for any use of their product. Oracle Linux includes Oracle's Unbreakable Enterprise kernel. It's one of the main features of Oracle Linux that differs from Red Hat. They put a lot of effort into that. And it offers better Oracle software and hardware support. One feature of that, as an example, is how Oracle Linux doesn't require a reboot of a server to apply security patches. And that's because of that Unbreakable kernel. Even though Red Hat includes CPU pinning features, they are not recognized by Oracle as a means to limit the use, the licensing of processing resources. That's why you've got to use Oracle Linux. So even though, if you happen to be paying for KVM under Red Hat, you want to be aware of the fact that if you just go to try and utilize the KVM, if you run an Oracle on it, you're not going to be able to segment to reduce the licensing requirements through pinning. You won't be able to do that. So, okay, let's jump into the Oracle Linux support pricing, because this has changed as well, along with their different announcements. During January of this year, Oracle changed the way they license their support subscriptions for Oracle Linux. Previously, Oracle used the metric of a system and saw servers as having either 2 or less sockets or more than that, right? So it was kind of like, either the low end or everything else was covered above that. And with a socket representing a slot for a CPU to be inserted into a server. There's been some confusion, over the years, because in some instances, Oracle requires that a system not go beyond a capacity, a socket capacity. So if you had 2 sockets, even though maybe only one was occupied by a processor, it would still count as a capacity limit, right? That does not account here. Nothing's been done about that. So it's actually an occupied socket, which kind of makes sense because it's really hard to get servers today that really only have a few slots for smaller type of uses. But for this, it's got to be occupied. And then when you occupy it, they're going by a license metric of physical CPU pair. So the physical CPU pair is based on a count of physical CPUs that occupy filled sockets. All physical CPU pairs must be covered if you're purchasing a support subscription for any of them. So you can't kind of just like license a couple. You have to license, the whole server. If you want to see all the features and differences between Linux Basics and Linux Premier, take a look at the link at the top, www.oracle.com/Linux/support. It'll give you kind of a breakdown and show you all the features of one versus the other. So that has some more detail on it. An important note, if you currently have a subscription to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, then you can utilize Oracle Linux and KVM for free because it's included, but only for your OCI-based solutions. So if you've got part of your environment in the cloud and you want to try and leverage it to kind of use some of this for free, then you want to do it in the cloud. Because if you did it on premise, you'd have to license it separately on-premise, but the OCI does give it to you for free. So let's take a look at how the old pricing compares to the new pricing. Okay, so as you can see from this table, in December 2022, there used to be 4 different types of support subscriptions. This was reduced to only 2 in 2023, right? So you had 2 types of basic, 2 types of premiers. Now it's just a basic and a premier. The pricing for Oracle Linux Basic is the only one has not changed and has actually improved for 4-socket systems. So it's actually gotten cheaper in a 4-socket system running basic. The 2-socket systems, it really hasn't changed at all. But in the 4-socket and 6-socket for the Premier, it's gone up, as well as for a 6-socket for basic, it's gone up. So it's much more expensive. Because if you remember, the previous metrics kind of allowed you to just go by 2 or less. You're good with just a 2-socket license, and then it was everything else because it was the whole system. Now they're getting more granular. So you literally have to kind of go in and count the sockets and basically divide by 2. And you've got to have to round up to make sure you're covering everything. So that's the requirement. Next, we have another polling question. It's kind of 2 questions in this one.
So the question is, are you using Oracle KVM to limit your Oracle software licensing costs? And if so, are your KVM instances managed via Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager?
Typically, it's going to be, at least for the second question, because if you're running KVM, the Linux Manager is pretty much the only way you're going to go do it.
If you're going to answer, I would ask that you give us your answer now. All right, we'll end the poll. And that's how it came out. So yes and yes, Wayne, you were correct. It seems to go that way. But we do have some people who aren't sure. So we will, if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask us. Wayne.
Cool. All right. So now OVM versus KVM CPU pinning. So the key thing here is to make sure everyone understands CPU pinning. First, the ability of any server virtualization platform that enables an administrator to deploy a server instance that acts like its own standalone server. Okay. And when you're in a virtualization platform, that's what you're doing. Then it's very useful on servers with any processor. If you dedicate or pin a CPU to a particular session, it has the potential of limiting the number of processors that must be licensed for a given software's use. So the concept of it is you have all these different virtual resources that are pretty much acting as their own virtual server. Normally, Oracle would require you license everything in the whole box. And that's how you have to license it. With their OVM, you could pin it. So if you had, say, a 32 processor box, but you're actually using 16 processors for an OVM solution, then you could just literally pin it so that you only have to license those 6 processors for OVM. So it's huge. Now, with when you have stuff like VMware, VMware has those features of pinning, except that Oracle does not recognize that capability. In Oracle's view, it's kind of, they go from the fact of like they don't know if anything changed within the software or the hardware, whether they had no confidence that it would not refer back to being open to everything. So that's what they're saying. But they just don't accept it, as well as like with Red Hat, they don't accept it with Red Hat. But KVM does, continue to have that feature. So that's a very key feature, obviously. It's also worth noting that using hard partitioning to limit the Oracle software licensing also adds some restrictions to activities such as live migration and scheduling policies available on Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager. And this is not specific to just Oracle products. We see this as well with IBM LPARS, which is a hardware-based virtualization in power systems. They also have a live partition mobility, and that basically enables one to shift processing servers, right? It's the kind of the virtual server from one server to another physical server, and which is great, but you can imagine that that kind of breaks the ability to kind of control a pinning. So if you're going to pin something in a single server, great, but you can't have multiple servers with live partition running. It's not allowed. So there's a couple conditions that exist that you can't have in place in order to be for Oracle to accept the CPU pinning of those units. And it's the same with KVM as it is with the others. The use of KVM does not require Oracle Linux VM. You can get it to utilize it for free, except to take advantage of the hardware partitioning and the management. You need the access to the management tools, and the only way to get that access to the management tools is through having a Premier subscription. As far as configuration details, Oracle does produce a document called Hard Partitioning with Oracle Linux KVM. In that document, there's a latest and greatest, I think it's from 2022, that goes through and just describes exactly how you have to set it up, you know, what features the live partition and so forth you can't have set up and so forth, just to ensure that you're setting up in a manner that Oracle will support the pinning, and just therefore you get the benefits from that. Okay. All right. Now, this is Oracle Linux OVM pinning, a starting example. This is a scenario that's specific to OVM, but it is possible that KVM might cause a similar scenario, which is why we're bringing it up. The new KVM metric for support subscription of a physical CPU pair isn't really impacted for Oracle Linux support subscription pricing the same way that OVM would have been impacted because it was licensed separately. But it would impact anything that's running within these virtual instances. And as you can see, like on this socket 0, you've got this is a scenario that pops up when you're kind of allowing the system to allocate pinned resources for you. Except what we have come across is that sometimes it'll allocate it across cores. So in this case, you've got, you know, one thread on one core paired with another thread on another core, and the same on a separate box. Unfortunately, if Oracle was to add those up, they would come to a requirement of 2 CPU licenses, which is kind of like, I'm not really using 2 CPUs. So what you can do is actually go into using the management tools and reallocate these things, which was always our recommendation for people with OVM. First, to check to see if that actually occurred when you set up your OVM. And then if it is like that, to go and change it. So what it would look like after you go and change it is essentially you're just moving them into the same core, so that this way, when counted, you're only counting half a core in this example, which would add up to only a single CPU license would be required. So we haven't seen this specific with KVM, but KVM is so new, we haven't had, you know, a lot of instances where people are, you know, have made the switch just yet, and seen enough to know that it's happening there as well. It's a possibility. It could. So it's worth kind of checking when you're within the management application that that is not a situation, or else you want to fix that. Because again, anything that's loaded on top of it, that's running on top of it, is going to want to count its own, you know, and it could end up costing you more licenses. Oracle comes in and does an audit. So, and that is it. So I don't know if there's any other questions.
We did have one polling item left, and that was to ask the audience, are you actually, if you're still on OVM, Are you planning on switching to KVM or KVM, excuse me, or are you planning on going in another direction entirely, or have you not decided yet? So if you want to answer the poll, now is the time to answer. And again, if you answer, I will share the results with you.
I think that was a duplicate.
Oh, we know. Oh, if it was, I will end it now. All right,
Yeah.
then. Share it again. Okay, that is it. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I have a couple of questions here, but I've already put them over to my team, and the answers are very much, it depends on your exact situation. Oh, sorry, we do have two questions. It didn't pop up a second. Well, I'm sorry, we do have two questions. If you're using multi-threading and you want to pin the VM to threads you have, to make sure you pin the VM to the threads that belong to the same core ID. Yeah, I'm sorry, that was a statement. Make sure that you pin them to the same as that belong to the core ID. So that was it. That was actually it. That was the only somebody had a statement. I think I'd give them put that out there for them.
Yep.
So that's it. And if you had another question besides the one I just answered, we will get back to you after the session. We have a couple follow-ups with you. We'll get back to you either today or very early tomorrow. With that, it concludes our webinar. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for participating. And don't forget, we have a performance guarantee that we can save you more money than our fees will be. That is all. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.